Everybody, Invisiblekatana here with my review for RWBY Volume 9, Episode 3, Red, Rude, and Royal. I really enjoyed this episode. So far, it's our longest with 3 extra minutes, so we got a 20-minute episode in this one, and it was definitely the action episode. We got an actual fight scene, which is pretty cool. I actually liked the song in it as well. Like, we couldn't hear all the lyrics, and I was kind of shocked that they didn't play it just as like the ending song with lyrics on it, so you can kind of hear more. But I thought the song sounded pretty cool, so we'll see if they play it again or just wait till the whole OST for the season comes out. But thought it was cool. I like the action that we got. I love the teamwork. I thought that was really cool. I feel like that's something that, despite the fact that they work together so often, I feel like we don't really see them utilize their actual powers together kind of the way that we saw in this episode. I feel like it's really rare that we see that sort of thing happen. And it might be the first time we've ever seen it happen where Weiss actually uses one of her constructs for someone else as a weapon. So I thought that was super cool. She had like the angel wings as well. That was pretty sweet. So I like the way that was handled. Also, they did a really cool thing story-wise, because of course the first 2 episodes were like, hey, this is where we are, this is what the story is, and so we have to figure out like, hey, do we follow the path of the story or do we kind of go a different path? Like, some things are here, some things are there. And then this episode was like, oh, that story happened, but that's not what this is anymore. This is like, they even say it's like we're in the crappy sequel. And I was like, all right, that's interesting. I'm curious to see how that plays out. It seems like they're it's like a Wizard of Oz and then a Return to Oz situation, which if you haven't seen Return to Oz, the movie, I haven't seen like the movie itself, but all I know is that movie is crazy and weird and it's not super fun and happy. So we'll see how much of that sort of inspiration, if they go like a darker side of it, or it's just, it's still lighthearted and fun and we just see what happens. But that was really cool. I was like, all right, so there was a Red King, something happened. The soldier mentions if it wasn't for your kind, and then the prince later was like, I knew you guys were human, and he was super pissed. So the soldiers knew that they were humans, and for whatever reason, it was a human that did whatever happened, to the Red King. So I was like, all right, humans are, not very wanted, like at all. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out as far as the season is concerned. And it's like, all right, well, what do people think of humans? Why do they think that about humans? What happened? Who was the human as well? That's a big part of it. It could have been the girl, but it also could have been anyone else. Like, you never know. Who knows? It could honestly, they could just be like, surprise, Ruby's mom's been here the whole time. Like, I kind of doubt it, but well, who knows? It could be crazy. But I'm excited to see where they go with it. I thought this was a fun episode. I feel like there isn't too much to talk about. We met the prince. I assume he may show up again. He seems, considering he's the prince, I'm sure he'll show up in some way, a little bit down the line. Maybe things will be okay, or maybe he'll just be mad again. But I liked his character. I thought he was pretty funny. I like that when he cried, it was like actual marbles came out and they even had the sound effects. I just thought that was cool design. I was like, that's actually pretty sweet. So I like that. I like the attitude of his character. You could clearly see that he was either potentially spoiled when his dad was around, and who knows if they're going full fairy tale, mom probably died before as he was born, some crazy thing, and then dad dies later. So he was either already super spoiled, or just being the prince and everyone does everything that made him spoiled even though he's young. And you can see that he cheats even at the game, like when Ruby makes her first move and the little the white pawn gets hit, and then he kind of looks over and he's like, and then of course he pretends that he's injured, or that he lost that battle. I was like, okay, let's see how this plays out. And it just ends up being like, all right, Weiss, Blake, and Yang get shrunk down, which was really funny that they had Yang punch herself. I don't know why they did that, but it was really funny. And of course they just beat everybody up, so it was like, all right, it was super easy for them to technically win. But of course the prince being like, oh, you guys are humans, you must have cheated. And so then that's absolute chaos, which means that Ruby is now the only full-size character. I thought that was going to change at the end, because I'm just going to call it Cheshire. It was just like, oh, they met, the Curious Cat comes in, and I was like, oh, okay, Curious Cat, do some magic or something like that. And then Cheshire was like, I guess I can go with Curious Cat. That's probably what they'll call him until he gets an official name. But even in the book, it was Curious Cat, so we'll see if that changes anything. But I was like, okay, they're still small. I thought for sure, it was like, once they made that escape, it was like, all right, I can do this thing for you or whatever. I'm sure they'll find someone. They can't be tiny the whole season. That would be insane. But I was very shocked that even at the end of this episode, they were like, nope, they're still small. They didn't go through some magic thing and then they were reverted back. The cat couldn't do anything. It was just like, yep, that's it, you're small. So they're just going about it. So I was like, all right, I'm excited to see where this goes. The funny thing about the cat kind of pausing when he was leading them out, and they're like, we came to see the king, but then it turns out he's not here anymore. And then he stopped and was like, how do you know the king? And so they don't know that obviously they're within like a fairy tale world. So I'm excited to see how that plays out too, because there are going to be some characters that probably ignore some of the stuff that Team RWBY says, And then I assume there are going to be characters like the cat who are like, oh, that's very fascinating that we're, you know, kind of, we're not the only world. And obviously they've interacted with humans before, which is a really interesting thing. So it makes me wonder how that's going to play out as more characters kind of come along the story. And it's like, all right, who decides to listen to them when they say, yeah, we're from somewhere else and we technically know all of this stuff, because for us it's just a kid's book, which could also mean that that was the, you know, we don't know how age and time and all of this crazy stuff works. They could say anything they want going forward, but that could have just been an actual story. I mean, we know for a fact that exactly the same thing has happened in the past with Ozpin and Salem and all of that stuff. So all those fairy tales are real. So at some point, somebody was there somehow, but we don't know exactly, you know, what the conditions are as to how that ended up happening. So somebody was there for real. And then somehow they, you know, made it to the surface or whatever, and they told that story, and it became another one of the fairy tales that every kid, you know, grows up knowing, whether you're human or faunus. So I'm excited to see for sure how that plays out, because I think that's going to be something that they could tie it into the rest of the series. It could just be something where it's just a person did it a long time ago. That person could be dead. I doubt it'll end up being Ruby's mom or anything like that, but they could tie that into the next season going forward, where it's like, oh yeah, this person was here, and then maybe, you know, we'll learn about that person this season, and then we'll meet them next season. They could be, you know, hero or villain, and I think that'll be really cool. I think that'll be a cool way to tie this season, which so far it seems like that thing where it's like, this is a brand new location. It's, you know, I mean, it's volume 9 is kind of the thing, like, you know, you go 3 volumes and then some crazy new step of the series happens. So now that we're in kind of that next phase, they're literally in another world or dimension or level of dimension or something. It'll be interesting to see how this does carry forward into the rest of the series, because I don't think it's just going to be one and done, like, oh, they get here, they get out, all right, we're back to, you know, Remnant and everything's cool. It's like stuff here is going to transfer over, one of which most likely being Neo having this new ability, which I mentioned before. I was like, it's possible that, you know, all the silhouette stuff is her as different people, but what if her powers advance? What if, even though she can't talk in her own body, if she changes into someone else, she can literally change her vocal cords, and, you know, they would just hire a different actor, but she could pretend to be all these different people. And now we get this episode and she randomly, basically she's pulling out shadow clones. So I was like, okay, that's really cool. And then those clones, I mean, obviously we don't see it in this one, but those other clones of her can easily turn into other people. So I don't know if she has to be that person and then they change, but I would assume it's, you know, they could just pop up. Honestly, I'm going to treat it like Naruto until they say otherwise. They can do their own thing pretty much. She'll command them and then they can change independently of her having to change. So I'm excited about that. You know, I assume that they killed the Jabberwock at the end. I also would assume it's the same one, but, you know, it's impossible to, like, it could easily be a different one. He runs past like those leaves and I couldn't tell. I was like, was he already bleeding, or was that meant to represent that when you cross that border, that's when it's super dangerous? Like, it's so dangerous that just running past, you know, a couple of blades of grass, or they're actual like blades and they cut you. So I wasn't sure. I was like, I can't tell if he was already injured or if that was meant to represent it's so dangerous once the, you know, once you go to the other side, it's so dangerous that even grass is deadly. So I was trying to figure it out. I would love to know what you guys thought about that, because I was like, if he's injured, I mean, technically we could see what happens in next week's episode, but I was like, if he was injured already, then it kind of takes away from that story of like, well, how did he get injured? But they could technically still answer if, you know, something else is going on. But he was clearly looking for something. Like he runs across the bridge, which I thought was a really cool dichotomy. Like the dark side of the bridge was on the light side of the planet, we'll say. And of course, the light side of the bridge was on the dark side of the planet. So I was like, all right, that's interesting. And he, you know, like I said, he runs across and, you know, they show the blood on the grass. So I was trying to figure that one out. Like I said, we'd love to know your help on that. But he was over there, and then of course a comet falls, and I would imagine that the way they handled it was this is in real time. So we saw the girls, they're, you know, chasing after Curious Cat, then it goes up past the clouds, and then we actually see him running across the bridge. So I was like, all right, I'm just gonna assume that this is in real time and that we didn't unknowingly kind of go backwards in time. It's just people fall in different places at different times. It's just, you never really know how it's going to play out. For whatever reason, Neo landed on the dark side of the planet. And so her getting her powers, who knows if that's just poof, upgrade, has anything to do with where she landed, if that place has, you know, extra magic, anything like that. I assume it's just based on her, but obviously she was confused as well. And they showed the way they did it, where it was like she would change and it had like that almost like an area of effect kind of spread out from her. And I was like, all right, it's hard to tell if that is her or if that is her interacting with the world, and, you know, the world itself is amplifying her abilities and then maybe just unlocking it. So she might have that permanently throughout the series. It could just be something she has here. I would hope that she does gain control of it, and it is just a permanent thing, because that obviously would make her an even cooler villain, because I think she's one of the best when it comes to the action. Like, that's kind of her thing physically. So, you know, multiples of her is like, that's crazy. Like, she's already really hard for people to fight, so multiple versions of her, like her being able to make clones, is insane. Like, that could really like skyrocket her ability to be like a #1 villain, honestly. So we'll see what happens with that. But it was a great ending. It was definitely like, all right, so Jabberwock, if it was even the same one, that was another thing. I was like, is it just one? Is it the only one? Because seemingly he's dead now. So there might be multiples. Hard to really tell, if I'm being completely honest. But either way, I love the ending, and I was like, all right, that has me excited for, you know, getting into the darker side of the story, and you know, where things are headed, what sort of craziness Neo is going to get herself into, and how that's going to interact with Team RWBY. Obviously, we still have to wait and see what in the world's going on with Jean, and who knows if, once again, they'll show anything above the surface, or above, I guess, the clouds, wherever they are. So if we see anything from Remnant and anything going on there, I feel like they just won't do that unless it's like saved for like the very end. But obviously we just kind of have to wait and see what happens. But I actually enjoyed this episode. I thought it was really cool. My favorite thing about it, honestly, despite the fact that it was a really, you know, it was the first action episode, we got a cool action set piece, I really like the fact that they have no idea what's going to happen next. And it seems like this was the episode where it was like, okay, we're in a fairy tale, and once again, someone dying or disappearing or whatever, and it most likely being the fault of humans, considering they're so hated, that means they're in a really dark story. It's much darker than they thought it was, which will probably in some way get back to RWBY and tie into her, you know, innate darkness and sadness and stuff. So I'm sure that's gonna, you know, play a big part in the story as a whole, where it's like, this already happened and this is dark. This darkness affects the darkness in the character, and we'll just see how it plays out. Obviously, we still don't have the young girl, who may or may not end up being like a reborn version of Alex from the story. So, you know, theories have changed now, because of course I assumed that that's who that was, and now it's like, well, this is after that story. It could still be her, and just, like I said, reborn, or just anything. They could literally do anything, and it's like, magic, sure. So we don't really know at this point, but I am looking forward to what we're going to be getting, even more so now, because when they knew the story, it was interesting based on like, all right, well, do they follow the path of the story, or do they not follow the path? And now it's like, well, we don't know what to do, but also we're in a really dark version of the story where humans are definitely the enemy, because once it was like, well, you guys are humans, you guys are bad. So I want to get some answers on that for sure, but I definitely enjoyed the episode. We'll love to know what you guys thought about it, so please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.